The Zarian flagship Verx floated silently in the vast expanse of space. Its sleek, dark hull shimmered against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside, the tension was thick. Ambassador Varric stood in the command chamber, staring out at the holographic display of Earth. The human planet, with its chaotic mixture of technology and war, had been nothing like they expected. They had thought they were dealing with a primitive species, but what they encountered on Earth was something far more dangerous. Varric's hand clenched around the edge of the control panel. "This cannot be happening," he muttered under his breath. His species had always been in control, always been the ones calling the shots. But Earth was different. Earth was unpredictable. On the bridge, Cartwright, the human representative, leaned casually against the console, his arms crossed. "You've seen the file," he said. "Now we just wait." "Wait." Varric turned sharply, his eyes flashing with frustration. "You think we can simply wait while your species continues to disregard galactic law? The Zarians will not stand by and let this go unnoticed. You are a threat to the entire galaxy, and we will not allow you to grow unchecked." Cartwright's face remained impassive, but a hint of a smirk played at the corner of his mouth. "Is that so? We're just getting started, my friend. You haven't seen anything yet." As Varric turned away from him, his mind raced. He had heard rumors of humanity's reckless behavior, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Humanity wasn't just rebellious or unpredictable. They were something else entirely. The Zarians had assumed they could intimidate, manipulate, or outlast any species they encountered, but the humans were not like any species they had faced before. Across the bridge, an officer spoke up. "Ambassador, there's a transmission from the Galactic Council. They wish to speak with you immediately." Varric nodded sharply and gestured for the screen to be activated. The hologram flickered to life, revealing the stern faces of the Galactic Council. Vina, the first speaker, was at the center, their form radiating an unsettling calm. "Ambassador Varric." Vena's voice echoed through the chamber, their tone as cold as space itself. "We've been monitoring the situation. The humans have ignored every warning we gave them. Now they are openly defying galactic law. What is your assessment of the situation?" Varric hesitated. The pressure of the moment weighed heavily on him. "It is worse than we feared. These humans, whatever their shortcomings, they do not follow the rules. They have no fear of us, no respect for our authority. They don't fear anything." Vena's glowing eyes narrowed. "You are not the only one watching, Ambassador. We have already dispatched fleets to Earth's borders. If the humans refuse to cooperate, we will take measures." Varric's stomach churned. He had heard the rumors, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of dread through him. The Galactic Council was moving quickly, and they were not known for their restraint. If the humans didn't back down, the consequences would be catastrophic. Back on the Zarian ship, Cartwright took another step closer, his voice low and calm. "You know," he said, "you're not going to win this fight. You can try, but the humans, well, you've seen how we respond to threats. We don't bend. We don't break." Varric looked at Cartwright, his jaw clenched. "You talk as if you have everything under control. But you don't. You're out of your league here." "Maybe," Cartwright said, a glimmer of something dark in his eyes. "But you have no idea what we're capable of. If you think you can intimidate us into submission, you're going to learn the hard way." Varric turned away, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just a diplomatic failure. It was the beginning of something much more dangerous. The humans had no regard for galactic laws, and they had no fear of the galactic powers. They were a wild card, an uncontrollable force, and that made them more dangerous than any enemy he had ever encountered. As the Zarian flagship drifted through the stars, Varric realized the galaxy had made a grave mistake. Humanity was no longer just a species to be watched. They were a threat, one that was quickly becoming impossible to ignore. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than anyone had anticipated. The Zarian flagship Verx drifted silently in the dark void of space, its sleek hull reflecting the dim light of distant stars. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, thick with anticipation. Ambassador Varric paced the command center, his hands clasped behind his back. His mind raced as he considered the implications of the humans' behavior. He had heard about their unpredictability, their fierce independence, but he had not believed it would escalate this quickly. Earth had barely made it into the galactic fold, and yet they had already begun to defy the very foundation of the galactic order. The Galactic Council had warned him, and now he was facing the consequences of ignoring their advice. Ambassador, the voice of his chief officer cut through his thoughts. We are receiving another transmission from Earth. They've refused the Council's demands. Varric's jaw tightened. He had expected this. The humans had shown no sign of backing down, and now it was clear that they were preparing for something far more dangerous. Put it through, he ordered, his voice colder than the space outside. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of a human officer, his expression calm, but with a hint of defiance. Ambassador Varric. The officer's voice was steady, but there was an underlying edge to it. We've received your ultimatum. We don't appreciate being threatened. We don't respond well to threats. The humans don't bow down to anyone. Varric felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard reports of human resistance movements, but to hear it firsthand, spoken with such confidence, was a different matter entirely. You are making a grave mistake, Varric replied, his voice tight with frustration. You cannot challenge the Galactic Council. You will face the consequences of your actions. We will not stand by and allow this defiance to spread. The human officer smiled, a knowing smirk that only intensified the unease in Varric's chest. You don't understand, do you? This isn't about defiance. It's about survival. Humans don't fight because we're told to. We fight because we have to. And right now, you've made us feel like we have no choice but to fight. So, if you want war, Ambassador, then war is what you'll get. With that, the transmission ended and the screen went dark. Varric stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His mind struggled to process the implications. The humans were not acting out of desperation, as many of the Council had assumed. They were acting out of something deeper, something far more dangerous. Prepare the fleet, Varric said abruptly, his voice filled with resolve. We will move to Earth's outer orbit. The Galactic Council will back us. If the humans are unwilling to listen, then we will show them the price of their rebellion. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, but they didn't question his orders. There was no time for hesitation now. The game had changed, and they were about to discover just how much the humans had evolved in the past few decades. Meanwhile, on Earth, in the heart of the human capital, a similar conversation was unfolding. Cartwright stood before a holographic display of the galactic map, his arms crossed. Around him, military advisors and high-ranking officials listened intently. Ambassador Varric believes he can intimidate us into submission, Cartwright said, his voice calm but firm. But the Zarians don't understand. They underestimated us, and that is their biggest mistake. One of the officers, a woman with short, dark hair, raised an eyebrow. You really think they'll back down? Cartwright turned toward her, his face serious. No, I don't. But the Zarians are about to learn what happens when you push a human too far. We won't bow to anyone. If they want to fight, we'll give them one hell of a fight. A heavy silence filled the room. Cartwright could see the unease on their faces, but he knew this was a turning point. The humans had always been fighters, but now they were more than that. They were a force the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. We need to be ready, he continued. We won't win with numbers alone, but we will win with speed, ingenuity, and something the Zarians don't have: unpredictability. The officers nodded in agreement. They knew what Cartwright meant. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were defending their right to exist on their terms, and that was a fight they wouldn't lose. As the military began to mobilize, Cartwright stood before the map once more. His eyes were fixed on Earth, the home that had birthed such a resilient species. The Zarians had made a mistake, and the humans were about to make them regret it. The atmosphere around Earth's military command center was thick with anticipation. Cartwright stood at the front, his hands gripping the sides of the console as the room buzzed with activity. The holographic display showed the massive Zarian fleet in orbit around Earth, their ships gleaming with deadly intent. "They've arrived," Cartwright muttered under his breath, his voice low and cold. He had expected them, but seeing them now, in full force, still sent a shiver down his spine. The Zarians were ruthless, efficient, and powerful. They had the numbers and the technology, but they didn't have the one thing that mattered most in a war: the human spirit. "All hands, prepare for the worst," Cartwright barked as he turned to face his team. "This is not just a battle for Earth. This is a battle for everything we are. If they want war, we'll give them a war they'll never forget." The officers in the room nodded, their faces a mix of determination and fear. They knew what was at stake. The Zarians had underestimated humanity, thinking they could force Earth into submission. But Cartwright and his team knew better. The humans were ready. The time for diplomacy was over. The first strike came without warning. A Zarian warship, the Orkvash, fired a barrage of energy pulses at Earth's outer defenses. The blast hit Earth's atmosphere, causing a massive shockwave that rattled every building, every structure. A cry of alarm rang through the command center as the ground beneath their feet trembled. "Shields up," Cartwright ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Activate all defense systems." The room was alive with movement as technicians worked quickly, inputting commands, activating weapons systems. Outside, the sky began to light up with energy blasts as Earth's defenses retaliated. Human-made lasers and missiles shot toward the Zarian fleet, striking their ships with precision. But the Zarians weren't the only ones prepared. In the chaos of the first blast, a fleet of Earth's advanced fighter crafts took to the skies. Flying in tight formations, their sleek, fast-moving ships zipped through space with unparalleled agility. They launched rapid-fire energy missiles at the Zarian ships, each blast sending a wave of sparks across the dark expanse. "Status report," Cartwright barked as the battle unfolded. "The outer defense shield is holding steady, sir," an officer replied, but there was a note of concern in their voice. "We're facing heavy resistance from the Zarian capital ships. They're using coordinated energy barriers." Cartwright's eyes narrowed. The Zarians were more advanced than they had anticipated. Their shields were stronger, and their tactics were more organized than any of their previous enemies. But he didn't care. Humanity had faced worse odds before, and they had always prevailed. "Focus fire on their command ship," Cartwright ordered, pointing at the Orkvash, which had taken the lead in the attack. "If we take out their command center, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." The room buzzed with activity as human ships locked onto their target. A barrage of lasers and missiles struck the Orkvash, shaking the ship's hull, but the Zarians were quick to respond. Energy shields shimmered to life, absorbing much of the damage. On the ground, a different battle was raging. The Zarians had deployed ground forces, mechanized soldiers with superior firepower and advanced armor. They moved swiftly, their heavy footsteps echoing across the ruins of Earth's major cities. In response, Earth's infantry prepared for urban warfare, hunkering down behind barricades, ready to defend their planet. Inside the military command center, Cartwright kept his eyes glued to the screen. The Zarian forces were relentless, but humanity's response was just as fierce. Every shot fired, every missile launched, was a declaration. Earth would not go down without a fight. As the battle stretched on, Cartwright's mind raced. He knew this was only the beginning. The Zarians would continue to press harder. But he also knew something they didn't, something that would change the course of the war. The Zarians had made a grave mistake. They thought humanity was just another species they could push around. They had no idea what humans were capable of when cornered. And now, the full might of Earth's defenders would be unleashed. "Prepare for Phase 2, Cartwright said, his voice filled with a quiet fury. "We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're going to show them why you don't mess with humanity." A holographic display flashed as new commands were input. A series of hidden weapon systems, designed for the worst-case scenario, were activated. "Bring them the storm," Cartwright whispered under his breath. "We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot on our world." As the battle raged on, with blasts lighting up the sky and explosions shaking the Earth, Cartwright stood at the heart of Earth's military command center, staring intently at the screens. His expression was unwavering, but behind his calm demeanor, a storm of thoughts churned. The Zarians were relentless, their ships bombarding Earth's defenses without mercy. But there was something they didn't know, something they had no way of preparing for. "Sir," a voice broke through his focus. It was Lieutenant Markham, a trusted officer who had been with Cartwright since the early days of Earth's military buildup. "We've got a surprise waiting for them. It's time." Cartwright nodded. "Initiate the plan. Let's show them why they've made a grave mistake." As the officer moved to the control panel, Cartwright stepped back, eyes narrowing on the holographic display in front of him. The Zarian fleet was advancing, their ships launching waves of laser fire towards Earth's remaining defenses. The human military had held them back so far, but it was becoming clear that without reinforcement, the tide of battle could turn against them. Markham worked swiftly, his fingers dancing over the control board. "Phase 2 is ready to go, sir." Cartwright's mind was focused on one thing now: the secret weapon Earth had kept hidden, not just from the Zarians, but from the galaxy itself. It was an asset they had developed in response to an old threat, a weapon of unimaginable power that could turn the tide of any conflict. The weapon they had dubbed Project Exodus. "Activate Project Exodus," Cartwright said, his voice cold as steel. At his command, the ground beneath the command center rumbled slightly, a faint tremor that sent a shiver through the room. On the massive screen, a new series of holograms flickered into existence, showing the deep, secretive corridors beneath Earth's military bases. These were places that had been built and reinforced in the event of such a conflict, a hidden force that no one, not even the Galactic Council, knew existed. From deep beneath the Earth's surface, massive doors opened with a creaking groan. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts began to emerge. These colossal ships, unlike anything the Zarians had seen before, were Earth's ultimate trump card. They were designed with the best human technology, combining advanced energy shields, hyperspeed propulsion, and devastating weaponry capable of wiping out entire fleets in seconds. Cartwright watched the first dreadnought break through the surface and rise into the air. It was a sight to behold. A massive behemoth of steel and firepower, moving with an elegance that belied its size. The Exodus-class ships weren't just weapons. They were symbols of humanity's defiance, their refusal to bend, to break, or to surrender. "Send them a message," Cartwright said, his voice steady but filled with purpose. The dreadnoughts fired their first shots, massive energy blasts that shot toward the Zarian ships in orbit. The bright beams cut through the space like a scythe, tearing through the Zarian shields and causing explosions that lit up the dark sky like fireworks. It was a show of strength, and a signal to the invaders that Earth was not as weak as they had thought. For the Zarians, the sudden appearance of these immense ships was nothing short of terrifying. Their fleet, which had once seemed unstoppable, now found itself under siege by an enemy they had underestimated. The Zarian warships began to break formation, trying desperately to regroup as the new threat overwhelmed them. "Sir, their fleet is in disarray," Lieutenant Markham reported, his voice laced with excitement. "It's working. They're retreating." Cartwright allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but he knew better than to get complacent. The Zarians were not easily defeated, and they would regroup. But for now, Earth had the upper hand. The tides of war were shifting in their favor. On the ground, the fighting continued. Earth's forces had gained ground against the Zarian soldiers, pushing them back inch by inch. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts were giving the soldiers a fighting chance, covering them with their massive firepower and clearing a path for the ground forces to advance. Still, Cartwright didn't allow himself to relax. He knew that the Zarians would fight back with everything they had. The Exodus-class ships were a game-changer, but they were not invincible. There were still far more Zarian forces in the galaxy, and the Zarians would likely call in reinforcements soon. "Keep the pressure on," Cartwright said, his voice unwavering. "This is our moment. We can't let them regroup. Let's end this now." With the Exodus-class dreadnoughts leading the charge, humanity had turned the tide in the battle. But as Cartwright watched the battle unfold, he couldn't help but wonder. Would this victory be enough to stop the Zarians, or would it only provoke a much larger and more devastating retaliation? As the massive ships fired on the retreating Zarians, Earth's soldiers pushed forward. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Zarians had arrived, Cartwright believed that humanity had a real chance. They were not just fighting to defend Earth anymore. They were fighting to show the galaxy what it meant to mess with humanity. And the Zarians were about to learn a painful lesson. The once confident Zarian fleet had been thrown into disarray. Earth's unexpected Exodus-class dreadnoughts had shattered their sense of superiority in a matter of hours, and now the invaders were on the defensive. The sky was filled with sparks and smoke as Zarian ships scrambled to regroup. Their advanced technology, once thought unstoppable, now seemed helpless against the might of humanity's hidden weapon. But deep within the Zarian command ship, a sense of rage and resolve began to take root. The Zarians were not creatures accustomed to defeat. They were a race born of conquest, forged in the fires of hundreds of victorious wars across the galaxy. To be driven back by a species they had considered primitive, this was unacceptable. Zarian High Commander Vrax paced across the command bridge, his fists clenched. He had never expected such a powerful response from humanity. The reports were clear. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts had completely turned the tide of battle. The Earthlings were no longer simply defending. They were now the ones who were pushing them back. "This will not stand," Vrax muttered, his sharp, alien features twisted in anger. He turned to his officers. "We need reinforcements. Immediately. Prepare the fleet for a full counterattack." One of his advisors, a holographic figure made of shimmering blue energy, spoke up. "Commander, reinforcements from the core systems will take several weeks to arrive, and we have already lost 3 battleships in this skirmish. Our resources are stretched thin." Vrax's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated the humans, and that mistake had cost him dearly. But he was no stranger to difficult situations. He turned toward the advisor, his voice low but firm. "Then we'll use what we have. We'll make them regret ever challenging the Zarian Empire." The advisor hesitated but then nodded. "As you command, Commander." Vrax's mind raced. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts had been a formidable surprise, but there was one advantage the Zarians still held: their overwhelming numbers. The Exodus-class ships, while powerful, were few in number. The Zarian fleet, despite its losses, was still larger. But numbers alone wouldn't be enough. They needed a plan, a way to break the Earthlings' newfound confidence. A sinister grin spread across Vrax's face as he formulated his next move. The humans had shown their strength, but what they hadn't shown was their weakness. He would find that weakness and exploit it. Meanwhile, on Earth, Cartwright was aware of the growing tension. Though the Zarians were retreating for now, there was no mistaking the fact that this was far from over. His officers were working tirelessly to strengthen defenses, but he could feel it, the calm before the storm. The Zarians wouldn't back down. They would come back harder. "Sir," Lieutenant Markham said, his voice tense, "we're receiving a message from the Zarians. It's encrypted, but it looks like a direct communication." Cartwright's brow furrowed. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, and a hologram appeared. It was Vrax, his alien form flickering with a threatening aura. His voice came through cold and steady. "You think you've won, human." Vrax's voice echoed in the command center. "This is not over. You've shown your strength, but we will show you the true meaning of power. Prepare for the consequences of your actions." The hologram flickered out, and a tense silence filled the room. "That's a threat," Markham said, his voice steady but filled with concern. Cartwright's jaw clenched. He'd known the Zarians wouldn't back down easily. They had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. He turned to his team. "Prepare for what's coming," he said, his voice filled with determination. "This isn't over yet. The Zarians are coming for us, harder than before. But they won't break us. They'll see that we won't back down. Not now. Not ever." Back on the Zarian command ship, Vrax's confidence was growing. His plan was in motion, and soon the humans would know just how fragile their victory really was. The Zarians had one last card to play, a weapon of unimaginable power, one that had been kept secret until now. If it worked, it would wipe out Earth's defenses in one swift, devastating strike. But Vrax was calculating. He knew this would be their final chance. If it didn't work, the Zarians would be forced to retreat, and Earth would stand victorious. But if it did work, it would mean the end of humanity's fight for survival. The entire galaxy watched with bated breath, unsure of what would come next. Would Earth's newfound strength hold? Or would the Zarians' hidden weapon prove too much? As the war continued to escalate, one thing was certain: the fate of humanity was hanging by a thread. And Cartwright knew that the coming days would determine whether Earth would stand tall as a beacon of hope or be crushed beneath the weight of the galaxy's darkest forces. The battle for Earth had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The stars above Earth's atmosphere gleamed like silent witnesses to the war that had now engulfed the entire galaxy. With every passing hour, the Zarian fleet closed in, and the human defenders prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Cartwright stood at the head of the command center, a quiet resolve in his eyes. His officers were working around the clock to fortify the defenses, but there was a heavy air of anticipation. The Zarians were not going to let this go easily, and humanity's final chance was drawing near. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts had held the line so far, but Cartwright knew it wouldn't be enough for much longer. Their technology, while powerful, was not infinite. The Zarians, with their vast numbers and hidden weapons, had the upper hand. But humanity wasn't about to give up. "Commander, we've received a transmission from the Galactic Council," Lieutenant Markham reported, breaking the tense silence. "They say they've finished evaluating our data, and they have a plan to assist us." Cartwright nodded grimly. The Council had been silent for too long, but now, with humanity's fate hanging in the balance, they were finally offering help. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that it might be too little, too late. He turned to Markham. "Patch it through," Cartwright said. The screen flickered to life, and the familiar form of First Speaker Vanna, the energy being from the Meridian Council, appeared. The Council's representative spoke with a tone of deep concern. "Commander Cartwright, we have reviewed the situation in detail. The Zarians are deploying a weapon of unimaginable power, one that could wipe out entire fleets with a single strike. We have mobilized every available resource, but it will take time for reinforcements to reach you. You must hold your ground." Cartwright's face hardened as he listened. The Zarians had a weapon that could devastate everything they had worked for. The stakes were higher than ever before, but Earth's defenders were not backing down. "I understand," Cartwright said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We'll hold the line. Tell the Council to be ready. We might not survive this, but we will not go down without a fight." The screen blinked off, and silence enveloped the room again. But this time, it wasn't just the silence of waiting. It was the silence of decision. Cartwright could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on his shoulders. Earth had become the last bastion of hope in a galaxy torn by war. But could they withstand the overwhelming might of the Zarians? In the heart of the Zarian command ship, High Commander Vrax prepared for the final phase of his plan. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts had proved resilient, but the Zarians had the weapon that would shatter humanity's will to fight. The Dark Nova Cannon, a device capable of unleashing the destructive force of a collapsing star, was their last resort. Vrax knew the risks. If the weapon failed, it could wipe out the Zarian fleet as well. But there was no other choice. He could not afford to lose the war. Not now. Prepare the Dark Nova Cannon for activation, Vrax ordered. His voice was cold and resolute. We end this now. The ship's systems hummed to life as the weapon was charged. It was a deadly force, something so devastating that even the bravest of civilizations trembled at its mere mention. Once fired, it would erase everything in its path, including Earth's last line of defense. Back on Earth, Cartwright stood before the Exodus-class dreadnoughts, watching as the fleet gathered in formation. Their shields flickered with readiness, and the powerful weapons of the dreadnoughts hummed in unison. The time had come. The final battle was about to begin. He turned to his officers, his face set in determination. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We hold the line, no matter what. Humanity's survival depends on what happens here. This is our final stand." The command center buzzed with activity as the officers prepared for the inevitable. They knew that once the battle started, there would be no turning back. But they also knew that the Zarians had underestimated them. Humanity was more than a species. It was a force to be reckoned with. And if the Zarians thought they could wipe them out easily, they were in for a rude awakening. The skies above Earth were dark with the shadows of the approaching Zarian fleet. Their ships were a menacing sight, vast and numerous. But the humans stood firm. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts powered up, their weapons locking onto their targets. "Target the Zarian lead ship," Cartwright ordered, his voice sharp with authority. The energy from the dreadnoughts surged as their massive weapons fired, streaking across the sky with brilliant force. The Zarian ships fired back, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the battle raged on. The Dark Nova Cannon was activated. The Zarian flagship unleashed its full destructive power, sending a beam of concentrated energy toward Earth. The weapon was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. A single shot could end everything. But humanity's defenses were stronger than the Zarians had anticipated. The Exodus-class dreadnoughts deployed a powerful countermeasure, a force field that absorbed the blast. It held, just. Cartwright watched, his heart racing, as the blast reverberated through space. For a moment, it seemed like the entire universe was holding its breath. And then, the force field cracked, but it held. Humanity had survived the first blow. The final stand had begun. The fate of the galaxy now rested on the shoulders of those who dared to fight for their survival. Would humanity triumph against impossible odds, or would the Zarians finally crush them? The battle for Earth was far from over, but one thing was certain: humanity had proven its strength, and the galaxy would never forget the day Earth stood defiant against an empire that underestimated it. The war had only just begun, and the universe would never be the same. The crystalline spires of the Meridian Council's headquarters pierced the violet sky of Centauri Prime. Their surfaces refracted starlight in mesmerizing patterns, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the grand plaza below. Inside the chamber, representatives from over 300 spacefaring civilizations had gathered, ready to discuss a matter that would soon reshape the entire galaxy. First speaker Vena, a being of pure energy contained within an auric mechanical frame, floated to the center of the chamber. The room fell silent, every representative attuned to the power of Vena's presence. The speaker's voice resonated through the neural networks that connected all minds present, a harmonic echo in the chamber. "We have detected a new species," Vena began, their voice carrying an eerie calm, yet with a sense of urgency. "They call themselves humans." As Vena spoke, holographic displays materialized, painting the air with images of Earth, Vast, sprawling cities, primitive spacecraft shuttling across their skies, and most concerning, scenes of endless warfare. The assembly watched, entranced by the sight of the human species in its infancy. They are barely a century into their space age, Vina continued, their tone measured yet filled with underlying concern. Yet they advance at an unprecedented rate. What took most species millennia to achieve, they accomplish in mere decades. The image shifted, showing humankind's relentless progress, new weapons, faster spacecraft, and the startling development of quantum computing. The images then turned dark, displaying decades of military conflict. In each battle, humans adapted quickly, evolving their tactics and technologies to counter the growing threats they faced. A hush filled the room, the weight of the revelation pressing on each representative. As the final image flashed across the room, a human soldier, battered but resolute, the floor was quiet for a long moment. Ambassador Tekera, of the synthetic confluence, was the first to speak. Her crystalline form shimmered with the light as she addressed the assembly, her voice both soft and sharp. Surely you don't suggest this primitive species poses any real threat to us. Their technology is centuries behind even our most basic systems. Their fleets are laughable. Vina responded, the speaker's voice never wavering. It is not their technology that concerns us, Ambassador. It is their adaptability. It is their response to conflict. The speed at which they learn, develop, and overcome. Under pressure, they evolve. Their greatest strength is not in their weaponry, but in their will to survive. As the room took in Vanna's words, a palpable tension grew. There was more, something even darker looming on the horizon. But before anyone could respond, a new hologram flickered to life at the front of the room, showing a much different scene. It was not Earth, but a sleek alien ship, together with a high-ranking envoy arriving at Earth's spaceport. Cut to Earth. The image on the display changed again. The Zarian envoy, a race known for their power and influence, had arrived on Earth. The delegation stepped out onto the tarmac, expecting the usual formalities of diplomacy. What greeted them, however, was far from ordinary. A giant, blinking neon sign read, "Negotiations close. Go away." Confused and growing uneasy, the Zarians boarded their flagship, the Verks, as the ambassador muttered, "This is not how things are supposed to go." In the negotiations chamber aboard the ship, the Zarian ambassador, Varek, stood facing Cartwright, a human representative. "You cannot simply declare war out of frustration," Varek sputtered, shaking his head in disbelief. "There are protocols, forms to fill out, meetings to schedule. Do you even have a reason for war?" Cartwright, cool as ever, reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file labeled "Reasons for War." He flipped it open, scanning the pages before speaking in a low, detached voice. "Pick one," he muttered. "Too much bureaucracy. Repeated delays. Vague wording in diplomatic treaties. Take your pick." Varek's eyes widened. This was no mistake. No miscommunication. Humanity had ignored all the rules of galactic diplomacy. And worse, they didn't care. The introduction sets the stage for the conflict, establishing the fear and uncertainty surrounding humanity's rapid advancements. The human response is portrayed as shocking and unpredictable, throwing the established galactic order into chaos. The shift from the Council's debate to the surprising incident on Earth builds tension, leaving the audience wondering how this will unfold. Each part will continue building on the unexpected human behavior and their rise to power, with each new scenario introducing fresh challenges and environments for both the humans and their galactic counterparts. This suspenseful pacing will encourage the audience to stay engaged throughout the story.